My name is Deja Whitmore, 27 years old nurse from Chicago's South Side. I thought I knew who I was, until a letter from a man I'd never met shattered everything my mother told me about our past. What I uncovered didn't just rewrite my family's history, it exposed a murder, a legacy of crime, and a betrayal that nearly destroyed us. Stay tuned, because what started with a mysterious inheritance turned into a fight for truth, justice, and reclaiming everything they tried to bury. If you love true family drama, deep secrets, and stories where justice finds its way through the cracks, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumbs up, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Now settle in, because this story starts with a letter and ends with a legacy rewritten. It was the kind of cold that crept into your bones, typical for a Monday in February on Chicago's South Side. I had just wrapped a 12-hour shift at Mercy Hospital, my scrubs soaked with fatigue and the lingering scent of antiseptic. I climbed the narrow stairs to my apartment above Miss Laverne's hair salon, ready to collapse. But something stopped me. A single envelope lay wedged in my mailbox. Thick, cream-colored, hand-addressed in blocky black ink, Deja M. Whitmore. There was no return address, no postage stamp. I stood under the weak flicker of the hallway light, turning it over in my hands. It didn't look like a bill. Didn't feel like junk. Something about it was intentional, deliberate. Inside was a letter printed on heavy cardstock with the header, Shapiro, Goldberg Associates, Estate Division, 330, North Michigan Avenue, Chicago, Illinois, 60601. Dear Ms. Whitmore, we regret to inform you of the recent passing of Mr. Maurice Langston. As part of the execution of his last will and testament, you have been named as a beneficiary. Please contact our office to schedule a private consultation. Sincerely, Russell Shapiro, ESQ. I read it twice. Maurice Langston. The name didn't ring any bells. Was this a scam? Some new hustle cooked up to prey on people like me, tired, broke, and just curious enough to fall for something? Still, something about the letter felt real. Heavy paper. Clean font. Professional seal. Even the smell, it had that faint, woody scent old books carry. I googled the firm. Real. Swanky. Located on the 38th floor of a Michigan Avenue high-rise. That alone made me feel out of place. The letter said nothing about what I was inheriting, or why this man, a stranger to me, had included me in his will. I kept thinking, why me? Why now? I called my mom that night. Mom, does the name Maurice Langston mean anything to you? The silence on the other end stretched uncomfortably. No, she said flatly. Never heard of him. Why? I told her about the letter. The lawyer, her voice changed. Deja, throw that away. Don't get involved in something that ain't got nothing to do with you. That was her way, shut down what you can't control. Bury the past deep, but my gut told me this was about me, so the next morning, I called the number in the letter. Scheduled an appointment. As I hung up the phone, I stared out the window toward downtown, its glittering skyline sharp against the gray winter sky. Somewhere in one of those buildings, answers were waiting. I didn't know it then, but that letter would unravel everything I thought I knew about my family. And reveal a legacy soaked in betrayal, secrets, and blood. And once you open that door, there's no going back. The lobby of 330 North Michigan felt like another world, quiet, polished, and too clean to be real. I stood in front of the mirrored elevator, my reflection looking out of place in a borrowed coat and scuffed nursing sneakers. The marble under my feet echoed every step like it was judging me. The 38th floor opened to floor-to-ceiling windows and soft jazz humming from invisible speakers. A receptionist greeted me by name before I even introduced myself. Mr. Shapiro will be with you shortly, she said, smiling like it was rehearsed. A few minutes later, I was ushered into a sleek glass office where the view made my breath catch. The whole city sprawled below, Lake Michigan like glass in the distance, the L tracks winding like veins through the grid. Russell Shapiro rose to shake my hand. He looked like someone who belonged here, white, silver-haired, and wrapped in a tailored suit that probably cost more than my rent. Ms. Whitmore, he said warmly, gesturing to the leather seat across from him. Thank you for coming in. I sat, clutching my bag tight against my side. I appreciate your time. I didn't know the deceased. So this is all a little strange. He nodded, opening a folder with crisp precision. Understandable. Mr. Maurice Langston named you as a beneficiary in his will. He passed away on January 19, natural causes. Still unfamiliar. I don't know who he is. Shapiro paused, then looked directly at me. According to these documents, Maurice Langston was your maternal grandfather. I blinked. The words didn't make sense. My mom never mentioned him, I said, already hearing her voice in my head. Don't get involved. He and your mother, Cheryl Whitmore, were estranged. Deeply so. But Mr. Langston made specific provisions for you. He pulled out another envelope. You've inherited a house. In Bronzeville. Deed is clean, taxes paid. You're the sole beneficiary. I opened the envelope with trembling hands. There it was, a property title with my name on it, but that's not all, Shapiro continued, his voice dropping slightly. He reached into the folder and pulled out a smaller envelope. He also left this note, and an item which we've placed in a safe deposit box for your retrieval. The note was handwritten, shaky but legible. Deja, you never met me, but I watched you grow from afar. Your mother won't forgive me. Maybe she shouldn't. But the truth deserves to survive. Start with the journal. I swallowed hard. There's also a journal, Shapiro confirmed. He left it in the house. Said it would answer more than he could in a letter. I sat back, stunned. This man, this complete stranger, was somehow tied to everything my mother had hidden. The truth deserves to survive. The words echoed louder than the city beneath us, and suddenly, I knew I had no choice but to find out exactly what that truth was. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at the edge of my bed, holding Maurice Langston's letter like it might catch fire if I blinked too long. Your mother won't forgive me. But the truth deserves to survive. That line played over and over in my head like a song I didn't know the words to. By morning, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I called my mom just after sunrise. She was already awake, she always was, probably fixing her coffee and watching the news in her robe, the same way she had since I was little. Hey, Ma, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We need to talk. She replied, distracted. Everything okay? I went downtown yesterday. Met with a lawyer. Her silence sharpened instantly. What lawyer? Russell Shapiro. He's handling the estate of someone named Maurice Langston. More silence. Then, you didn't. I stood, pacing. He said he was my grandfather. That he left me a house. And a journal. A sharp inhale on the other end. I could hear the clatter of her coffee mug hitting the counter. I told you not to get involved, she snapped. Didn't I say that? That man's been dead to me for 30 years, and for good reason. But he wasn't dead, Ma. He lived right here in the city. He knew about me. He watched me from afar. Why wouldn't you tell me about him? Because it wasn't your story to carry. She didn't yell, but her voice cracked with something worse than anger, fear. What did he do to you? I'm not going down that road again, she said, quieter now. Leave it alone, Deja. Please. That man, he's dangerous, even from the grave. I froze. Dangerous how? You think a fancy lawyer's office and a handwritten letter make him a good man? You don't know what he did. You don't know what I had to run from. Her voice trembled. It wasn't the first time I'd heard it shake, but this wasn't about bills or bad weather. This was something buried deep. Then tell me, I pleaded. Tell me the truth. But she went quiet again. And then, finally, some things are better left in the ground. Don't go looking, Deja. Just take what he gave you and walk away. She hung up before I could answer. I stood there in my living room, the morning light bleeding through the blinds, and I felt the weight of everything she didn't say pressing down on my chest. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that her silence was protection, not punishment, but I also knew this: you don't warn someone not to dig unless there's something buried worth finding, and now I had to know what it was. The Bronzeville house sat behind a rusted iron gate on a quiet stretch of 44th Street, just a block from an abandoned church and a corner store with barred windows. The neighborhood had changed, like everything else in this city, but the house hadn't. It was a red brick two-story with stone lions flanking the porch steps. One was missing an eye. The other was cracked down the middle. It looked proud, but tired. Like a man standing tall after too many hard years, I stood on the sidewalk, key in hand, heart racing like I was breaking into something sacred. The lock clicked with surprising ease. Inside, the air was stale and still, like it hadn't moved since the day he died. Dust covered everything: bookshelves, picture frames, an old radio on a side table. A half-drunk glass of scotch still sat on the desk near the window, dried and amber like sap. Time didn't just stand still here, it had been embalmed. I walked through the living room slowly. The walls were filled with family photos I'd never seen. My mother as a child, 8 or 9, wearing a frilly Easter dress and scowling at the camera. A man with sharp cheekbones and a trimmed mustache held her shoulder. Maurice. He looked familiar, though I'd never seen him before. His face carried something I recognized in my own: around the eyes, in the jaw, in the back room, under a layer of dust and unopened mail. I found it, a black leather-bound journal. Thick. Worn at the edges. A folded letter stuck out from the front cover. I sat on the floor, legs crossed, and opened it. The handwriting was jagged, sometimes hurried, sometimes delicate, like his thoughts fought each other for space. October 1994, Cheryl came today. She's pregnant. Said the baby's not mine to worry about. I told her blood doesn't get erased by words. She said if I came near her again, she'd vanish. November 1994, she left. Changed her number. Changed everything. She's hiding that girl from me. From my legacy. But I see her. I know where they are. I flipped forward. 1999, I mailed Deja a birthday card. Never got a response. Cheryl's poison runs deep. 2003, built the trust. The house. The plan. I won't let this family name disappear. Even if she hates me, Deja deserves to know who she comes from. 2010, started the journal. Truth lives longer than people, and on the last page, if she finds this, I've done my part. The rest is hers. The safe is behind the fireplace. Start there. I looked up, suddenly cold despite the sun bleeding through the curtains. My grandfather hadn't just left me property, he'd left me a trail. And I wasn't sure where it would lead, only that whatever he was trying to preserve, my mother had tried just as hard to bury. But now the truth was in my hands, and I wasn't ready to let go. The journal fell shut in my lap, and the silence in the room thickened. Maurice's words still rang in my ears. The safe is behind the fireplace. Start there. I looked toward the old stone fireplace in the front room. It was massive, blackened from years of use and framed by hand-carved wood mantles. At first glance, nothing about it seemed unusual. But when I knelt beside it and ran my fingers along the brick, I noticed a single slab near the base that was slightly looser than the rest. I hesitated. Then pressed. It shifted. Behind it, a hollow space revealed a metal lockbox bolted into the brick. It wasn't large, maybe the size of a briefcase, but it was heavy, serious, and real. Inside, I found a neat stack of manila folders, a sealed envelope, and a slim black USB drive. My hands shook as I set the contents out on the dusty coffee table. The first folder was labeled, Confidential, Property Transactions. Inside were deeds. Transfers of property, some going back decades. Buildings, lots, businesses. Some were in Maurice's name. Others under aliases. A few had been sold, others held in trusts. But what caught my attention was the money. Massive sums moving through shell companies. Laundered. Hidden, the second folder was worse: surveillance, internal affairs. It was filled with copies of police reports. Scans of old arrest records, court cases, photos of people who had disappeared or died suddenly, men and women I didn't know, but who had all been tied to criminal activity across Chicago during the 1980s and 90s. One name stood out. Circled in red ink, Terrence Malick Jones. I read the summary. Former Marine, South Side resident, no criminal record. Shot in 1996 in what was officially ruled a robbery. But the file noted inconsistencies. A witness statement. And then, stapled to the back, a photo: my father. I knew it immediately. I'd seen the single photograph my mother kept in a locked drawer. This one showed him smiling in uniform. In the margins, Maurice had written, "He should have stayed away." I backed away from the table. My breath caught in my throat. My grandfather had known him. He had been watching everything. I opened the envelope last. It was a letter, scrawled in tight handwriting. "If you've made it this far, then you know. I did what I had to do to protect my legacy. Your father was a good man. But he got too close. Cheryl never understood. Maybe you will. The world won't remember me kindly. Deja. But you will remember me fully." I stared at the USB. There was more. Files. Photos. Maybe proof. Maybe rot. Maurice hadn't just left behind a house or a journal. He left behind the truth, corrupted, calculated, and cold. I thought I was just inheriting a forgotten name, but what I'd found was a blood-stained empire, and now that I knew, there was no turning back. I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the floor of that cold, dusty house in Bronzeville, my laptop glowing in the dark like some kind of twisted lighthouse, and I watched my family's history unravel bite by bite. The USB drive was organized into folders. One labeled BK Records caught my attention. Inside were scanned documents, spreadsheets, even photos. At first, the initials meant nothing. Then I saw a familiar logo, the faded graffiti tag I used to see on alley walls growing up, a black chess piece, a king with blood dripping from the crown. BK, Black Kings. My stomach dropped. Maurice Langston wasn't just some once wealthy businessman with secrets. He had been one of the founding architects of one of Chicago's most feared criminal syndicates in the 70s and 80s. He helped build an empire on drugs, extortion, weapons, and silence. One folder titled Loose Ends held names. Dozens of them. With notes next to each: dates, incidents, payouts, sometimes a simple check mark. Some of the names had question marks beside them. Others were underlined. But one stood out: Terrence Malick Jones, my father. Next to his name, typed in an old-school Word doc, were the words, Marine background. Persistent. Cheryl's weakness. Getting too close. Recommended action: D. Green. I froze. D. Green. That name showed up in multiple files. A known BK enforcer. Arrested in '97. Released in 2003. Never convicted. Maurice had ordered the hit. He had my father killed, not because he was dangerous. Not because he was a threat to the organization. But because he was inconvenient. Because my father loved my mother, and she loved him back. Because he wasn't part of Maurice's twisted plan for control. I found more in a folder marked Family Protocol. Emails. Letters. Internal memos written like corporate policy but dripping with personal venom. Maurice had eyes on my mother for years. He tracked where she moved. Who she talked to. Who she let near me. He'd written once, "She thinks leaving erases the bloodline. She's wrong. That child is mine, whether she wants it or not." I stared at the screen, rage crawling under my skin like fire ants. Maurice hadn't just betrayed Cheryl. He'd invaded her life, destroyed her future, and tried to claim me like property, an heir to a kingdom built on blood and fear. And my mother had been fighting that ghost alone all these years. I wanted to scream. To throw the laptop across the room. But I didn't. Instead, I sat there until sunrise, heart pounding, tears dry, mind spinning. Maurice Langston thought he could write his legacy in shadows. Thought if he left me just enough truth, I'd somehow understand. Maybe even forgive, but all he did was make sure I'd never forget, and now, I knew what I had to do. I didn't even remember driving home. I just remember my hands on the steering wheel, knuckles white, the city lights blurring as the weight of what I'd learned sat like lead in my chest. My mother was in the kitchen when I walked in, still in her robe, stirring her tea like it was any other morning. The smell of peppermint filled the air, calm and familiar, but nothing felt familiar anymore. She looked up and froze when she saw my face. "You went back," she said quietly. I dropped the folder on the table. "The one labeled Terrence Malick Jones." "I didn't just go back," I said. "I found everything." Her hand stopped mid-stir. "He had him killed," I continued, voice shaking. "Maurice had Dad murdered. Because he wasn't part of his plan. Because he loved you. Because you loved him back." She closed her eyes. Slowly, she sat down. The strength left her body like a balloon deflating. "I was pregnant," she said after a long silence. "Terrence was the first man who didn't want to fix me, he just wanted to love me. We were going to leave Chicago. Start fresh somewhere else. But Maurice. He saw everything as a threat. Even love." Tears slipped down her cheeks, silent and stubborn. "I begged him to leave us alone. He said I was being emotional. That I didn't understand what it meant to protect the family name. That you," she swallowed, "you were his blood, and he wasn't going to let some outsider ruin his legacy." My throat burned. "So he had him killed." "I don't know how he did it," she whispered, "but the night Terrence died, I knew. I knew who was behind it. And I knew I had to get you away from him." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Why lie? Why make me believe Dad was just some random tragedy?" She looked up at me, eyes raw. "Because if I told you the truth, you would have gone looking. And if you had, he would have found a way to pull you in. Just like he tried with me." I sat down across from her. The folder between us felt like a scar torn open. "You raised me to be strong," I said. "But you never told me what you were protecting me from." "I was trying to protect your peace," she said. "But maybe I stole your truth in the process." We sat in silence, the only sound the ticking of the old kitchen clock. Then I reached across the table and took her hand. She gripped mine like she'd been waiting years for that moment. The truth had shattered everything. But for the first time, we were finally facing it together. No more lies. No more silence, just a mother and daughter holding each other up. Ready to face whatever came next. Some people inherit money. Some inherit houses. I inherited a crime scene wrapped in silence, but I wasn't going to let Maurice Langston have the last word, not over me, not over my mother, and sure as hell not over my father, so I took the inheritance. Not because I wanted anything from him, but because I was going to use every cent to dismantle the story he spent his life controlling. The first thing I did was meet with Shapiro again. He looked surprised when I walked back into his office wearing confidence like armor. I signed the final documents and took full legal ownership of the house in Bronzeville and the remaining assets in the trust. He handed me the check. I didn't flinch. "This was your grandfather's legacy," he said. "No," I corrected him. "This is my beginning." Back home, I got to work. I used part of the inheritance to establish the Terrence M. Jones Memorial Scholarship, a full-ride tuition program for Black students from the South Side of Chicago pursuing nursing, criminal justice, or community advocacy. My father's name would be on every award letter, every diploma, every press release. He would no longer be a footnote in Maurice Langston's empire. He would be the reason other people rose, but that wasn't enough. I wanted the world to know who Maurice really was, so I made copies of the documents, clean, high-resolution scans of the USB contents, journal excerpts, even scanned court files and photos. I compiled everything into a timeline. A dossier. I didn't include my name. I didn't need to. Then I sent it anonymously to the Chicago Tribune. 2 weeks later, the story exploded, power broker or crime lord? New evidence ties late South Side real estate mogul to gang empire and unsolved murders. They ran it above the fold. With photos, dates, names. They interviewed victims' families, former detectives, even neighbors who had always suspected something but never had the proof. His reputation? Gone. The city stripped his name from community plaques. Foundations withdrew his name from buildings. Real estate projects were halted. His public legacy dissolved overnight, and for once, the silence that had covered our family for decades, thick, heavy, suffocating, was gone. It didn't bring my father back. It didn't erase the pain my mother carried in her bones. But it gave us something else: power. Voice. Closure. One afternoon, I stood outside the old Langston house for the last time. I didn't need it anymore. I sold it to a community nonprofit with plans to turn it into a youth center. I touched the old iron gate on my way out and whispered, "This story's mine now." Maurice thought he was building a legacy, but I'm the one who rewrote it. The grass was taller than I remembered. Our old two-flat on 79th and Halstead had been boarded up for years, a forgotten shell with peeling paint and shattered windows. But the moment I stepped back onto that cracked sidewalk, I felt it, the echo of a life my mother and I had once fought to protect. I bought the house at a city auction. Cash. Quietly, it took months to fix. The roof leaked, the foundation had shifted, and there were mice in the basement. But I didn't care. I hired South Side contractors, paid fair wages, and oversaw every detail myself. It wasn't about restoring what we'd lost, it was about reclaiming what had been stolen. The day we moved in, my mother stood frozen in the doorway, her eyes brimming with tears. She hadn't been back since we left during one long, scared night when I was 9, and she'd whispered, "Don't look back, baby." Now she stood in the same kitchen, staring at the fresh paint, the new tiles, the sunlight streaming through clean windows. "You did all this?" she asked. I nodded. "For us." She placed her hand on the counter like it might vanish, and for the first time in years, I saw her shoulders ease. We made new memories in that house. Sunday dinners. Quiet mornings. A garden in the back where she grew tomatoes and basil like her mother once had. The house became a place of healing, and as I settled into the rhythm of our new life, I realized something. Revenge hadn't come in the form of fire or fury, it had come in the form of resurrection. Maurice had tried to erase my father. Strip his name from our family tree. Control the narrative from the grave like he had in life, but I wouldn't let him. I spoke my father's name often now, Terrence Malloch Jones. I told his story to anyone who asked. His scholarship continued to grow. Students sent us letters, thanking us for giving them a future, and my mother? She laughed more. Smiled freely. She even framed the one photo she had of my father and placed it on the mantel. "He would have liked this house," she said one night as we sat on the porch, sipping sweet tea. "Yeah," I said, smiling. "He would have loved it." The air was warm. The street quiet. And for once, I didn't feel haunted by the past, because we'd come full circle. We didn't forget the pain. We didn't pretend the betrayal hadn't happened, but we reclaimed our story. Piece by piece, not as victims. Not as survivors, but as women who refused to be silenced. This was the house we came home to, not because it was easy, but because it was ours. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more powerful, emotional journeys just like this one. Share your thoughts below. What would you have done if you uncovered a legacy built on betrayal? And if you believe in truth, healing, and reclaiming your story, hit that notification bell so you never miss the next chapter, because sometimes the most powerful revenge is rewriting the ending.